What the hell is GM thinking? Now let's go ahead and start this video by looking at this vehicle from Cadillac, which is owned by GM. This is the Cadillac Celestiq, and it's their brand new luxury EV that's set to start production here in the next couple weeks. Deliveries are about to start, and GM has just released pricing for this vehicle. Now, besides it being 216 inches long, which is as long as a Rivian pickup truck, this car is starting at $340,000 US before options. Now, this post from Sawyer, the man who never sleeps, thank you very much, Sawyer, for your continued coverage of the EV space, started getting my mind racing on a lot of different things. Besides seeing a bunch of different pictures and really questioning the design language behind the car, it just really got me questioning a lot of the things that GM has been doing in the last few months. Now, this is on the heels of the previous EV that GM launched, which is the Hummer EV. This car has been out since the fourth quarter of 2021, and this car starts at about $100,000. Now, what's interesting about this car is I tried going to the GMC website, and I couldn't find the Hummer EV, which means that they'll likely pause productions for now, or they're just waiting for their dealerships to empty their lots of the car. In other ways, it's probably not selling well. And the reason why is since the fourth quarter of 2021, the Hummer EV, which starts at over $100,000 or did, they sold about 904 units total since that car was launched in the fourth quarter of 21, which equals to about 43 units per month of the Hummer EV. In addition to that, GM has released pricing for their brand new Blazer EV, which starts at around $57,000. And what's really fascinating about the pricing for this specific vehicle, for the Blazer EV, is that if we compare it to its gas car equivalent, the Blazer, not the EV, just the Blazer, that car starts at about $35,000 for the same exact trim. So that's the 2LT Blazer EV and the 2LT gas Blazer. And so the way that GM has been pricing their EVs against their ICE, their gas car counterparts, there seems to be about a $20,000 premium if you want to buy the EV equivalent of their gas cars, at least with the Blazer EV. What's additionally interesting is they also have an Equinox EV coming out in the spring of 2024 for the 1LT model. They have a sports version coming out at the end of this year in 2023. And if we look at the gas car equivalent of the Equinox, which is for the same trim, the LT Equinox, that car starts at about $27,700. So what's interesting there is if we apply the same $20,000-ish premium that GM seems to be applying for their EVs, now you have an Equinox that's going to start at $47,000, which I would like to ask you this question: who would want to buy that car at that price? And if we compare that price to the Tesla Model Y, which is Tesla's best-selling car and the best-selling EV in the United States, that same car starts at about $47,000. And so if that pricing were to hold, then that means that an Equinox EV will be priced the same as a Tesla Model Y. And so again, I'll ask the question, how many people would consider the Equinox EV at this price? And this is where GM's strategy around EVs right now is very, very confusing, and sort of the nature behind this video. I'm just really, really confused. In addition to that, you have the Cadillac Lyriq, which started deliveries not too long ago. And this SUV from Cadillac, again, a GM brand, starts at $59,000. And so what this means is that if you take GM's entire EV lineup that's live right now between the Hummer EV, the Blazer EV, the Lyriq, the Bolt, and now the Celestiq, even though the Blazer is not out yet, 3 out of 4 EVs that GM offers today are priced up market. They're priced above $55,000. And if you add the Equinox EV and the Blazer EV to the equation, this will make 5 out of 6 EVs that are priced above $47,000. The last time I checked, $47,000 is not really an affordable price for someone to buy a car. These are up market priced cars, including the Equinox and the Blazer, whose gas car equivalents are $37,000 or less, which is a little bit shocking to me, to be honest. Now, what's interesting about this is that the one car that's quote-unquote affordable is the Bolt, and this car has been discontinued, but not really. GM seems to be wanting to revive the nameplate under the Ultium platform. but this will likely be at a much higher price than it is now because they want to make it more sporty and they want to add more features to it. So it's just interesting how GM is navigating this environment right now with how they're approaching the pricing. But additionally, even if they were to sell this more affordable Bolt, this car is definitely not profitable. They're not selling it in enough volumes. And I hate to continually bring this up from Ford because they're brave enough to show this. Again, props to Ford. This is Ford's profitability with their EV market, and they're selling them at roughly negative 60% margin. And we can really use this as a comparison to see where GM and other legacy makers are. Sorry, Ford, I hate to keep using this graph, but it really shows what is going on with the legacy market right now, the legacy car market as it applies to EVs. Now, the question becomes, what is GM thinking? And this is where I'm trying to figure out what GM's strategy is from a pricing perspective for EVs, so I can help you understand what's going on and how to potentially prepare for your future EV purchase or whatever. Just whatever you want to use me for, I don't really mind. I'm just grateful that you're here. And if you're enjoying the content, I would love it if you throw me a like. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. So what seems to be obvious here, at least to me, is that GM's strategy is pivoting. They're trying to move away, I believe, from a brand that's able to offer cars across every single spectrum of pricing, starting at the low end all the way to the high end, to wanting to offer luxury-minded or luxury-priced vehicles, especially around electric vehicles. They're starting to really focus on these upmarket vehicles. And if you make an assumption that EVs will be the only type of transportation in the next, say, 10 to 20 years, then you can start to see that this strategy is playing out to mirror somebody that was doing this not too long ago. And this player here is Tesla. So Tesla started with their strategy back in 2008, 2009 by releasing a very expensive car in the Roadster. And if you look at the Tesla master plan for 2006, their blueprint was to build a sports car, to use that money to build an affordable car, to use that money to build an even more affordable car, and then also building energy systems. But these three steps at the top is what Tesla used to become successful. They started really expensive, then they went less expensive, and then they went even less expensive. And so within this lens, looking at it this way rather, it looks like GM is trying to do the same thing with the Hummer EV, the Celestiq, and then introducing the Blazer EV, the Equinox EV, and trying to go down market. One of the questions that I get asked often, or that I've seen asked often, is why doesn't GM just go straight to affordable vehicles? Why are they doing it this way? Why are they spending so much time up market trying to make expensive cars? And what's interesting about that is that I've heard so much commentary around legacy auto is way too big not to catch up to Tesla. They have all these factories, they have all this know-how, they have all these relationships. They don't need to do what Tesla does. They can just go straight in with a cheap car and wipe the floor with Tesla. But is this the case? Is this the case that it actually happened? The reality of the matter is that they can't do this. And the reason why they can't do this is because whatever EVs they make, again, sorry Ford, they keep making these at a huge loss. So they have to figure out how to build cars at some sort of volume that make them money. And doing a more expensive car enables you to make EVs more profitably easier because you're charging more for that car. So you don't have to pump as many cars out. You can pump less cars out and make more money for those more expensive cars. And that's why Tesla has been so successful, because they've been able to sell those EVs early on at a high profit because they were expensive. However, since GM hasn't been able to do this, what's interesting about this sort of comparison is that now it's become painfully clear, right or wrong, but it's painfully clear that legacy doesn't have a lead in EVs, that it's very much a thing that legacy automakers have to go through to try to get to that profitability. And GM's actions are really clear that this is where they're at. They are right now in this year, in 2023, where a player like Tesla was back in 2009 or 2012, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So they're about 10 years behind that trajectory, that cost curve that will allow them to come out with an affordable vehicle, which also means that following Tesla's blueprint of coming out with a very expensive car and then going down market seems to be the only way to get an affordable EV out. And Ford did the same thing with the F-150 Lightning and the Mustang Mach-E. Volkswagen's kind of doing it with Porsche with the Taycan, even though they have the ID3 and ID4 out selling, but those cars are not selling nearly as much as they should, and they're selling them at a loss. They're not selling them as a profit. So it looks like GM is another player that's saying, hey, I'm going to follow Tesla's blueprint, and I hope to make it out okay in the end. Now, if we were to draw a comparison to see if GM is on track to actually achieve the success that Tesla has, in the first full year of production in 2013 for Tesla, they sold about 22,000 vehicles, EVs, at 25% margin in 2013. So Tesla was able to sell a ton of Model S's and a few Roadsters that combined at 25% margin in the fourth quarter of that year, which means that they were selling enough volume and they were doing so profitably. And that enabled them to expand their factories and to start selling the Model 3, the Model Y, so on and so forth. Now, there is a huge problem with this when it relates to GM. We saw how Tesla performed in the first year. Now we need to see what GM is doing from a sales perspective to see if they're on track to be as successful as, let's say, a Tesla. So this is the quarterly sales for GM since 2021, the first quarter of 2021. And you can see in the first quarter, they sold about 9,000 EVs. So this is EV specific, and this is also just in the United States, which is GM's largest market by far for electric vehicles. I believe it's their only market in the first quarter of 2021. And then they had the Bolt recall, which is their cheaper car because their batteries were catching on fire, unfortunately. Then they've had sort of a resurgence towards the beginning of this year, and then they've sort of flatlined here in the second quarter of 2023. So this includes all the EV sales for GM in the United States by quarter. However, here's the big warning sign. It's a huge red flag that I want you guys to focus on. If you remove the discontinued, supposed to be a D there, discontinued, not really, maybe not profitable Bolt, so that small car that was yanked but then brought back, but then it's going to be brought back with a different nameplate, probably at a more expensive price, and definitely not profitable. If you yank that car out and look at how Tesla, or how GM rather, is following Tesla's blueprint, you can see that if it's scaled for the same exact number, so here's 25,000 and here's 25,000, you can see all the sales for GM for all their EVs. Then you remove the discontinued, not really Bolt. This is what their sales look like. So it's very, very, very low sales between the Hummer EV, the Lyriq, the Celestiq, which is about to start deliveries, the Blazer EV, which should start delivery very soon here. But this is where they are thus far through 2023. And so if you compare their progress for those vehicles against Tesla, which is playing in the same exact, say, luxury upmarket type of segment where Tesla's cars start at about $42,000, $43,000, then you can see that there's a gigantic gap between Tesla and GM. I don't know if you can see it on your screen. I promise there's a blue bar there. But this is how these two companies compare right now when you look at their segments. And if we were to quantify how far behind GM is, since the launch of the Hummer EV in the fourth quarter of 21, GM has sold 3,300 luxury EVs in total between the Hummer EV and the Lyriq, the Celestiq, again, which hasn't really started deliveries yet, and then we can add the Blazer EV and all the other ones as they start coming out. And now what's shocking here is that this is 11 times less than what Tesla was doing in 2013. This number here, which is already significantly less than what Tesla is doing, is 11 times less than what Tesla was doing back in 2013. And so some of the things that we can talk about in this case when it comes to this number is GM is either way behind or no one wants their cars. Now, it seems like they're way behind, about 10 years behind, but you could also make an argument that with the Hummer EV selling as little as it did, potentially GM is not playing their cards right and they're in the wrong market. But it's almost like they're forced to be in that market because being in any other market will for sure mean disaster because they don't have the scale to make EVs profitably, and that's why they're starting at the top. But it could be that at the top they can't sell any EVs. Let me know in the comment section below. And so what's becoming really clear here, specifically for GM, is that GM's long-term survival hinges specifically on the Blazer EV and the Equinox EV, because those two cars are at least a little bit more affordable. They're between $47,000 and $57,000 starting price. Hopefully for the Equinox EV is lower, but that's where they're at. And if those cars don't perform well, then it's very, very likely that GM is going to be in a very, very tough spot when it comes to their ability to sell EVs in the market. At these prices, early signs point to poor outcomes for GM, especially if you take how they've launched the Hummer and how they're launching the Celestiq and how the Lyriq is performing. Not the best sales number for GM. And I think that's really a shame, because in a market in EV, specifically in the United States, I think it would really help everybody, the consumer. It would help Tesla, it would help Rivian if we had more competitors out there selling cars that people want, EVs specifically, but it doesn't seem to be the case. But ultimately, I would love to hear what you think in the comment section below. Does this analysis make sense? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? And do you think GM is going to be able to turn it around? Or do you think it's really no problem? There's nothing really big going on here. This is going to be fine. They'll be able to carry the gas car business forward. It's not a huge deal. Everything will be fine. I would love to hear your opinion below. Real quick, if you do want to support the channel, I would love it if you subscribe. 58% of you that watch my videos often, thank you so much for watching, are not currently subscribed. So if you don't mind, click subscribe for me. And if not, that's okay too. We'll see you on the next one if you'd like to come back. Regardless, I really appreciate your support. If you do want to support the channel as well by purchasing merch or Athletic Greens, which is a supplement that I use every single morning, I have links for that in the description below. Thank you so much for your support. And lastly, I really want to give a huge shout out to Tim at Tim Detman. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly on X. Tim provided me with all the data that I used for this video, which he drew from Cox Automotive, and he manually put this all together, and it really helped me come up with a bunch of different ideas for content. So thank you so much, Tim. You're the man. I really appreciate you. Go follow him. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was informative and helpful, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.